What other areas, including Kentucky, are high in moonshine production, and what was the transportation process of making moonshine? The Commonwealth of Kentucky is highly known for its many bourbon distilleries. However, the Appalachian Mountain area and the mountains of eastern Kentucky are widely known for the production of moonshine whiskey. This Commonwealth is not the only area in the United States that is large in moonshine production. A state that is known for the making of this alcohol is the state of Tennessee. Specifically, the area of eastern Tennessee is very well known for the making of moonshine. Both Kentucky and Tennessee have the same process and the same moonshiner and revenuer relationship. These large areas of moonshine production are also similar in the way that alcohol was transported. The process of making moonshine is also another property they share. Making moonshine was not only popular in Kentucky, it was also popular in places like Tennessee. Additionally, to transport this moonshine was a risky job only certain people with creative minds and fast cars could do. Our group conducted 2 interviews. Our goal was to test people's knowledge of moonshine and to gain even more insight into this unique alcohol. The first interview is with one of our group members' brother, who currently resides in North Carolina. Tell me an experience you had with moonshine.
So I've had a couple of experiences with moonshine. Some of my most prevalent experiences with moonshine have been consumption-based. Different flavors, blackberry, apple pie, straight white lightning moonshine, different proofs. One maybe not so memorable experience was we had blackberry moonshine one time. I drank quite a bit of it, and then I decided to eat all the blackberries, the fruit that was left over. They're very potent, and I don't remember too much from that night. We made some stovetop moonshine before too, so that was a fun, interesting experiment.
Have you heard any stories from close friends or family members involving moonshine?
Yeah, so a friend of mine at a place of business of his that he used to work, when he got transferred to that location, he was quite surprised to find that the local moonshiner was allowed to sell his moonshine outside of the store, outside of their restaurant actually, and the cops didn't mess with him because they knew that his stuff was quality moonshine and was good moonshine, and they wanted to make sure that they knew that folks were going to be buying it somewhere, so they wanted to make sure they were getting the good stuff, so they left him alone because they knew his was good quality moonshine.
What are some stereotypes you have heard about moonshine?
That it'll make you go blind.
Did your experience with moonshine affect you in a positive or negative way? Explain.
I'd say it's pretty positive. I had a great time all around.
How does moonshine and NASCAR relate to each other?
So being a big NASCAR fan and a North Carolinian, NASCAR has its roots based in moonshine. Original moonshiners would take their stock cars that looked like normal cars that they had worked on their engines, and then they would get together and run them to see who had the fastest car. And that's kind of how they started out with NASCAR, which is stock car racing, or supposed to be stock car racing. They're not really stock cars anymore.
Our next interview was with one of our group members' mom, who resides in Tennessee.
Tell us about an experience you have had with moonshine.
The first experience I had with moonshine was at a housewarming party, and some family members brought in 3 different types of moonshine. One type was just the hardcore moonshine, and then I remember another one was peach moonshine, and the peach moonshine was really good. It was kind of like drinking juice. But the hardcore moonshine without any flavor in it was kind of like drinking gasoline is what I remember it tasting like. I remember spitting it out in the sink as soon as I took a drink. So that was my first experience with moonshine.
Do you know the process of moonshine compared to other alcohol?
I know that bourbon has to sit for a long time and age, and I know that moonshine is a short and sometimes simple process. They use corn whiskey and yeast.
Okay, have you heard any stories from close friends or family members involving moonshine?
My grandmother, Mammy, was a little girl. When she was a little girl, they had a lot of friends that would come in and bring samples of moonshine. I remember her telling me stories that once it turned dark, she would look into the mountains and see like smokes or little smoke clouds in the fall. And it was most of the time when they would make moonshine, it was in the fall. So you could look up in the mountains and see where all the smoke rings were going up. That was all the moonshine stills.
Have you heard any stereotypes about moonshine?
Yes, I've heard people refer to the people that make the moonshine, hillbillies or mountain people. They're also referred to as whiskey runners. Those whiskey runners always had really fast cars, referring to the moonshiners.
Did your experience with moonshine affect you in a positive or negative way?
Well, I think it was a positive way because anytime moonshine was brought in, it was always by family and friends, and it was at a get-together. And it seemed like whenever moonshine was brought in, there were always lots of stories, family stories from the past that were discussed.
Many people do not know the difference between moonshine and bourbon. The only thing they do know is that one is legal and the other is not. As many people would say, moonshine is actually bourbon's cousin. The grain, yeast stains, and charred white oak barrel where bourbon is stored have the biggest influence on the taste. Barrel aging is what helps give bourbon its distinct taste. Unlike bourbon, moonshine gets its distinct taste from unaging. In the winter, moonshine is hard to make because it has to stay warm, but according to Wheeler, quote, in the summertime, one could have it ready in 4 days, end quote. This unique way gives moonshine its harsh taste. Stockton, a Revenuer, states, quote, the making of moonshine, although I don't approve of it, is an art within itself, end quote.
The most common car bootleggers used to transport moonshine was the 1940s Ford Coupe because it was the most used car at this time. However, they had to make modifications to the engine. They would replace the engines with old ambulance engines, Cadillac V8, turbochargers or superchargers to increase their speed to uphold the heavy load of moonshine and also outrun the police. While transporting moonshine on the back roads, they would get chased by law enforcement, so they had to come up with creative ways to outrun them. They would install switches that turn off their brake lights or they would do a 180. A 180 consists of spinning the car 180 degrees, changing the direction of the car quickly, and fly right past the law enforcement in the opposite direction. Former Revenuer Agent Joe Carter stated Junior had a reputation for being a guy who had a hot rod with a one-brake wheel. He could go down the road and hit that brake and turn around in one lane of a highway and head back the other way at great speed. The guy Agent Joe is talking about is one of the most famous bootleggers who ended up becoming one of the most famous NASCAR racers of his time. Another way to trick law enforcement, bootleggers would sometimes steal license plates from other cars during the day and switch them. So the person that they stole's license plate was on their car while they transported moonshine at night. And then they'll switch it back to their own license plates during the day. So law enforcement couldn't find out who was transporting the moonshine, or they'll get the wrong person. Unless you were a moonshiner / a bootlegger, so the revenuers already had tabs on them.
Moonshine is not just present in the mountains of Kentucky, it is also popularly produced in the mountains of eastern Tennessee. Due to the presence of the illegal alcohol, there were plenty of law officials, also known as revenuers, Bob Cutshaw was a revenuer in Coke County, Tennessee, who began his work as a revenuer with the Tennessee Alcohol Tax Unit, which is now known as the State Alcohol Beverage Commission. Before liquor stores became a large source of alcohol, the revenuer's main job was to catch anyone making and distributing illegal whiskey. In an interview with Bob Cutshaw, he states that the moonshiners in the county were, quote, just good people, end quote. Most of the time, families that made moonshine were poor families, so making and selling the moonshine without paying taxes on it was the best source of income. Revenuers understood that these people were just trying to be able to provide for their families. Cutshaw states that these moonshiners saw producing moonshine as, quote, a way of life, end quote. Even though revenuers knew this, it was still their job to catch them for producing moonshine illegally. In conclusion, the making of illegal moonshine is a dangerous job that has major consequences if you get caught. Also, the making of moonshine was not just big in Kentucky, it was big in other areas of the United States. Bootleggers had to come up with creative ways to outrun law enforcement when they were being chased on the back roads.